Welcome once again, folks, to the Hour of the Time and our ongoing series of the exposure of the origins, the history, the doctrine, and the identity of Mystery Babylon. I'm William Cooper. Many of you have written letters and asked, how does one get into the mystery school since no one ever hears anything about it? And there appears not to be a campaign of recruitment, and you're absolutely right. In our research, we have found the requirements to be simple. Be of sound mind and body, have a sincere desire to be illumined, and simply knock up on the door. Well, to continue, remember that the first religion in the world was the religion of the worship of the heavens. And man eventually came to recognize the sun as the representation of the power and the ability of the hidden God of the universe, the invisible God of the universe, the all-powerful creator of everything. But man, as he gained his intellectual ability, began to look toward himself, toward the intellect as that God, and the sun, the representation of what used to be the invisible God of the universe, then became the representation of the intellect, the light, Lucifer. And man began to worship the Luciferian philosophy. He believed, these people who call themselves the guardians of the secrets of the ages, and still believe, that man was held prisoner in the Garden of Eden by an unjust, vindictive, and very cruel God, the God of the Bible, and that he was set free from the bonds of ignorance through the gift of intellect given to him by Lucifer through his agent Satan. Now, many people believe that Lucifer and Satan are the same individual entity, and they may be. I don't know the answer to that. I just know what the mystery schools believe, and I know what I personally believe, and what I personally believe doesn't have any bearing on anything. Knowledge, the truth, is what counts, and that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of here. Now, eventually, this philosophy of worshiping the intellect, or wisdom, or the mind, became known as Gnosticism. And the followers of Gnosticism began to be known as the Gnostics. An extraordinary number, folks, of exceedingly bizarre talismans and inscribed stones bear witness to the power of the secret Gnostic organizations which flourished in various forms during the few centuries immediately before and after the rise of Christianity in the Middle East. You see, one of the oddest emblems of these schools was the figure of Abraxas. Now, that's a human body clothed in a Roman soldier's garb, wielding a battle axe as if threatening an enemy. Now, in its left hand, it carried an elliptical shield upon which the words of power IAO and Sabaoth were sometimes written. The head of this fearsome being was that of a cock with open beak. Now, that symbolized the rising of the morning sun, because the cock crows with the sunrise. For legs, it had twin serpents. The serpent throughout history has always been a symbol for wisdom, the gift of intellect, coiling to either side. Underneath the figure sometimes lay a conventionalized thunderbolt. Now, who was Abraxas? His name, in accordance with Kabbalistic computation, is decoded to mean 365. Isn't it absolutely incredible that every single time we investigate one of these, it leads directly to the sun? For 365 days, or the number of days in the year, or the exact number of days that it takes the earth to make one revolution around the sun. Amazing. There was no god or idol belonging to the society, and this is where man made the transition from worshiping a god to worshiping the mind. The Abraxas figure merely represented the aspects of power which went to make up the supreme intelligence, the all-power. The body was man himself. The bird stood for intelligence and the hailing of light, illumination, which is the cock's habit at dawn. The tunic represented the need for struggle or revolution, socialism. The arms, the protection and power given by the dedication to the gnosis, or knowledge. The shield was wisdom, the club or whip, power, the two snakes, nous, insight, and logos, understanding, primordial knowing, which was the gift from Satan, the snake, the serpent. By means of this diagram, Gnostic teachers inculcated the theory that man comes to his full power by developing certain facets of his mind. He must struggle to arrive at gnosis. But this knowledge is of the mystical kind and is not the mere collection of facts. You see, great stress was laid upon personal mystical experience, to and through which the initiate was guided under conditions of great secrecy. The Gnostics did not confine their studies or their teachings to any one religion, but borrowed illustrations from all that were accessible to them. This caused them to be considered Christians, heretics, Jews who were trying to undermine Christianity, remnants of the Persian sun worshippers. They have been widely studied by early Christian sages, and it is upon the opinions of these latter that many conclusions have been formed. Little or no investigation of these, quote, people of wisdom, unquote, has been done by research workers on the spot in Asia and North Africa, where strong and interesting traces of their beliefs and practices still remain. The main teaching states that there is a supreme being or power which is invisible and has no perceptible form. It is pantheism. This power is the one which can be contacted by mankind, and it is through it that man can control himself and work out his destiny. The various religious teachers through the ages, putting their creeds in many different ways, were in contact with this power they claim, and their religions all contain a more or less hidden kernel of initiation. Now, this is the secret which the knowers can communicate to their disciples. But the secret can be acquired only through exercising the mind and body until the terrestrial man is so refined as to be able to become a vehicle for the use of this power, or, in their terms, illumined. Eventually, the initiate becomes identified with the power, and in the end he attains his true destiny as purified personality, infinitely superior to the rest of unenlightened mankind, to the state of apotheosis, where he himself is God. The symbolism in which this teaching is concealed, the methods by which the mystical power is attained, vary from one Gnostic society to another, but the constant factor is there: the attainment of that which humankind unconsciously needs. You see, the Gnostic claims that within every man and woman there is an unfulfilled urge which cannot be given any proper expression in the normal way, because there is no social means by which it can be fulfilled. This feeling has been put into man in order that he may seek the fulfillment which the Gnostics can give him. His search for completeness in love, trade, professions, theology is vain and unsuccessful. The theories of the various schools, folks, of Gnosticism with which the Christian clerics came into contact are very much secondary to the rituals and practices which are used to produce the gnosis, the enlightenment, the illumination. This has not been fully understood by too many people, who devote much space in trying to work out the beliefs of the knowers by a perusal of their writings or by reports which have been given them by others. simply, folks, because they do not understand the symbolism. It is not clear to them. It is veiled. It is the esoteric wisdom. What were and are the Gnostic practices? Well, first, discipleship, and the inculcated belief that the initiate must struggle, must devote himself as much as possible to the identification with the power which inspires all. Secondly, there are two kinds of men: those who are bound to the earth and to matter, and those who can refine themselves. It is from the latter class that aspirants are chosen, they claim. In every instance that we've investigated, they may choose them from the latter class, but they all end up in the first. Thirdly, the methods by which the divine illumination may come are many and varied, and it is the province of the teacher to choose which path he will give to his disciple to follow. Some Gnostics believe that frenzy and excitement would produce the necessary liberation of the mind from the fetters of the body. Remember the Sphinx? Others consider that this could be done best by fasting and meditation. Present-day Gnostic practice in the East has it that different methods suit different temperaments. And this could be one cause for the historical confusion as to which branch of heretics practiced what. The Gnostics believed themselves to be intellectual aristocrats. Their knowledge was only for the few who were ready to receive it, and that's why they do not recruit. You must knock at the door, and you and only you know when you're ready to receive it. And this is what made them a secret cult, not the fear of persecution. They had their own passwords and shaking hands. They tickled the palm as an identification signal, and they helped one another in every conceivable way, just as Freemasons do today. For they are one and the same, as they have always been one and the same with all the different versions of the mystery throughout the ages. Now, some say that they could not be called pantheists because they considered that the doctrine was secondary to the experience of religion, and the theologians and ordinary priesthood of any religion did not approve of that. They were not, in fact, a religion like most others, because they stressed the importance of the individual before that of the community. Those who were more enlightened were more important in every possible way because they were valuable, refined aristocrats. At the same time, they taught that providing the well-being of the Gnostics was assured. So was that of the community at large. And this meant that they could subscribe to the outward doctrines of any religion and could continue to operate under many different political religious systems. Gnosticism profoundly influenced men's minds, even in Europe, up to and after the Middle Ages, and its basic way of thinking is probably an underlying factor in other secret societies whose members would be surprised to know it, because the pyramidal organizational structure of the membership of these organizations means that nobody below the top, the very top, really knows anything of the true religion and goals of the society to which they belong. And so these people could truly be said to be the greatest group of followers and fools in the history of the world. For they think that they are illumined, but in fact, they are never given any real secrets, and only those at the top truly know what is really going on. Terrible obscenities and other crimes have been laid at the door of the Gnostics by the early ecclesiastical writers, although there is little doubt that some of them did believe in mass ecstasy. It seems unlikely that their secrets were well enough known to enable the commentators to assess them. And in most cases, whenever the commentators tried to assess them, they were assessing the exoteric, or the appearance, but not the esoteric, or the real truth of the object of the worship of the Gnostics. The belief that certain special men could control their destiny and obtain extra powers through dedication to Gnostic practices meant that inevitably there was a belief in magic. Remember on previous shows we discussed that belief in magic? Magic is real, folks. I have seen it work. It is not to be played with or laughed at or scoffed about. It is dangerous, extremely dangerous. The myriad Gnostic gems, or inscribed stones decorated with serpents, Kabbalistic names, and the rest, are more likely to be proofs of initiation and talismans than mere identification tokens presented to ensure admission to meetings, as some authors have thought. The reason for supposing this is that, one, the gems are very similar in many respects to talismans in use by other communities, including the Egyptians, and two, they can often be interpreted as containing magical messages or diagrammatical invocations. Ethically speaking, Gnostic belief is that there are two principles, that of good and evil. A balance must be struck between these forces, and the balance is in the hands of the Gnostic, the knower, partly because nobody else can tell whether an action is for the eventual good of the individual or the community. And this secret knowledge comes through the mystical insight which the supermen Gnostics attained. There's that reference to a super race or a superman again, which always crops up with these people, as it did with Hitler and many others. The rise of individuals who wrongly believed that they had attained to gnosis, all knowledge, some of whom were leaders of Gnostic societies, produced very notorious characters. Those who followed the way of the Ophite branch glorified the serpent who tempted Eve, and they still do that today. They did this because this snake, by his actions, brought knowledge into the world, gave man the gift of intellect, the use of which will bring him to the state of apotheosis, where man himself will be God. Basilides was a leader who taught that Jesus did not die on the cross, and you will see this crop up all through the history of the mystery schools, even in the Knights Templar. Since matter and material things were considered to be a part of the inferior non-spiritual world, the sect known as the Cainites called upon everyone to destroy those things which belonged to the world, and they called themselves the Destroyers, and their god is the Destroyer. These deviations and aberrants have attracted the greatest attention, as is natural, and the quieter teachers of the creed have received less attention. The pious horror with which the less respectable Gnostics were viewed by the early Christian fathers has stamped itself forever on Western literature and belief about the, quote, enlightened ones, unquote. But in more than one place in the Middle East, as well as in small groups in Western Europe, there are still followers of various schools of Gnosticism. They mainly follow the ideas held by Valentinus, with some variations. And this school teaches its initiates that matter is more evil than good, that man must be purified by mental concentration, that after death man will rejoin that from which he has been severed, and will be unified with those whom he loves in the great intelligence. They also believe that all matter will eventually be destroyed by fire. And if they have their way, that could be absolutely true. The Mandeans, a small but tenacious community which dwells in Iraq, follow an ancient form of Gnosticism, which practices initiation, ecstasy, and some rituals which have been said to resemble those of the Freemasons. And of course they do, because they are. In every Masonic temple you will see somewhere up on the wall a big letter G. And you will see it in their symbology, in their books. You will see this letter G. And if you ask a Freemason, being bound to the oath never to tell you or reveal the secrets to the profane, which is what they call those who are not initiates or adepts in the mysteries. He will tell you that it stands for God, but that is a lie. It does not stand for God, for I have researched it deeply all the way up the ladder of the stages of initiation. And at the top, those adepts known as the priesthood know this large letter G to represent Gnosticism. And it is an admission that they are indeed the recipients of the ancient Gnostic. They are Gnostics, and they are looking to attain the Gnosis, through which they will receive apotheosis. And they believe that they are the only ones in the world who possess truly mature minds, and thus are the only ones in the world capable of ruling the rest of us, whom they refer to as cattle. Cattle. Well, it's time to take a break, folks. Don't go away. I'll be right back after this very short pause. A most detailed account of what was said to be the 7 highest degrees of secret Egyptian initiation was first published in Germany in the 18th century. This strange and very exhaustive document combines many elements from the ancient mysteries. It seems to come from Greek sources, because many of the words used are Greek. And it could well be that we have here the modern beginnings of an attempted revival of ancient mysteries. Whatever it is not one of those fanciful and spurious ones which used to be printed merely to attract the credulous, because it is plausible and containing the sort of material which might well have formed the content of an initiation and mind conditioning system. And if you understand the secret religions as I do, and specifically the modern ones, you will quickly recognize this as authentic. The earliest version known is in the form of an anonymous pamphlet, probably not intended for public sale, of 30-odd pages, printed in 1785. Right in that area of history is momentous occurrences. It was republished in a French translation 30 years later, purporting to be the ritual of the master degree in Freemasonry. And if you know anything about the master degree in Freemasonry, you will soon see that it certainly is exact in its descriptions. The French editor claims that it is a composite ritual derived from the works of some 15 Greek and Roman writers. This degree, we are told, was open to Egyptian kings and priests alone, and only those specially recommended by an initiate could enter it. The usual procedure was that the pharaoh himself introduced the candidate to the priests. By them he was sent from Heliopolis, the city of the sun, and you'll never escape from the sun when you're studying the mysteries, to the Memphis priests. From there he went to Thebes. He was circumcised, forbidden to eat poultry or fish, and generally had to abstain from wine. He was put for several months in an underground cave and asked to write down his reflections. When he had done this, he was led to a passage supported by the pillars of Hermes, where he had to learn certain things which were inscribed thereon. As soon as he was word perfect, the Thesmorphus, or the introducer, came to him with a strong whip to keep the uninitiated or the profane at bay. He was blindfolded and his hands bound with cords. Now follows the procedure from the first degree of the select body. The candidate was led to the gate of men, where the introducer touched the shoulder of an apprentice, Portophorus, standing there on guard. He in turn knocked on the gate, which was opened. When the aspirant entered, he was questioned on various matters by the Hierophant, after which he was led around the Barantha in an artificial storm of wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. If he showed no sign of fear, Menes, the expounder, explained the laws of the Krata Rapoa, to which he had to agree. He was then taken in front of the Hierophant, made to kneel, and vowed fidelity with a sword point at his throat. As witness, he called upon the sun, moon, and stars. And where have you heard that before? His eyes were then unbandaged, and he was placed between two spare pillars called batiles, where lay a ladder of 7 steps, behind which were 8 doors of different metals of gradually increasing purity. The Hierophant, then addressing those present, as many Musai are children of the work of celestial investigation, exhorted them to govern their passions and fix their thoughts upon God. Now the sun, the moon, and the stars, you should know by now, represent the doctrine, the church, and the initiates. The sun, of course, is the doctrine, the moon is the church, and the stars are the body of initiates, or the 1,000 points of light. The candidate was taught, folks, that the latter symbolized the wanderings of the soul. He was told the causes of wind, thunder, and lightning, and given other valuable information, such as medical lore. He was given the password of recognition of this degree, which was, and I spell it because I don't know the correct pronunciation, A-M-O-U-N, meaning secrecy. He was taught a grip, given a pyramidal cap, and an apron called xylon. Around his neck was a collar, and he wore no other clothes. His duty was to guard the gate of men in his turn. The Portophorus was now able, after showing his devotion, to proceed to the 2nd degree. Following a prolonged fast, he was taken into a dark chamber called Endymion, the Invitation Grotto. He was now of the degree of Neocorus. Handsome women brought him dainty food. They were the wives of the priest, who endeavored to excite his love. If he resisted these advances, he was further lectured by the master of ceremonies, and led into an assembly, where the stolista, or water-bearer, poured water over him. Then a living serpent was thrown at him. The whole room was full of snakes to test his courage. He was then led to 2 high pillars, between which stood a griffin driving a wheel before him. The pillars symbolized east and west, the griffin the sun, and the wheel of 4 spokes the 4 seasons. He was taught the use of the level and instructed in geometry and architecture. He received a rod entwined by serpents, and that rod is still used today by the medical community. It's called the caducus. And he received the password Heave, meaning serpent, and was told the story of the fall of man. The sign consisted in crossing the arms over the chest, and his duty was to wash the pillars. Now, when the initiate was initiated into the 3rd degree, the member was given the title of Melanophorus. He was led to an anteroom, over whose door was written, Gate of Death. The room was full of copies of embalmed bodies and coffins. Here, too, were a number of dissectors, embalmers, and so on. In the center stood the coffin of Osiris. The Melanophorus was asked if he had had a hand in the assassination of his master. On his denying the question, he was seized by 2 tapaxites, or men who buried the dead, and led into a hall where he found all the other Melanophores clothed in black. The king himself, who always was present on these occasions, addressed him in an apparently friendly way, begging him, if he did not feel courage enough to undergo the test now to be applied to him, to accept the golden crown he was offering him. Well, he had already been coached to refuse the crown and tread it underfoot. At this insult, the king called for revenge. Raising his sacrificial axe, he touched the head of the initiate. And in one famous initiation, the king actually beheaded the man. The two corpse carriers threw him on the ground, and the embalmers wrapped him in bandages. All who were present wept. Now he was led to a gate over which was written, Sanctuary of the Spirits. Now the initiate was not supposed to be beheaded in that one famous initiation. And I don't know what they chalked that up to. Now, standing before the gate, the initiate waited. On its being opened, thunder and lightning struck the apparently dead man. Charon received him as a spirit into his boat and carried him to the judges of Hades. Pluto sat on his judgment seat, while Rhadamanthus and Minos, as well as Aethon, Nicreus, Alastor, and Orpheus, stood beside him. Very severe questions were put to him as to his former life, and finally he was sentenced to remain in these subterranean vaults. Now remember, this is an initiation, which sometimes lasts for months and even years. The bandages were removed, and he was told never to desire blood, never to leave a corpse unburied, and to believe in the resurrection of the dead and the judgment to come. Now remember, this is long centuries before Christianity. He was taught coffin decoration and the peculiar hierogrammatical script. The sign was an embrace to express the days of wrath. He was kept in these underground chambers until thought fit to proceed to a higher degree. These, quote, days of wrath, unquote, generally lasted for a year and a half, until the initiate was ready for promotion to the 4th degree. The Battle of the Shades. He was handed a sword and a shield and taken through dark passages. He met certain persons presenting a frightful appearance, carrying torches and serpents. He was attacked with the cry of Panis. He defended himself bravely, but was always taken prisoner. His eyes were bandaged and a cord placed around his neck. Dragging him into a hall, the specters disappeared. He was led into the assembly of initiates and his eyes unbandaged. Before him he saw a magnificent hall decorated with beautiful paintings. The king and the highest dignitary, the demiurgos, were present. All were wearing their alidai, an Egyptian order composed of sapphires. Among those present were the secretary, the treasurer, and the master of feats. The orator made a speech congratulating the new member on his fortitude. He was given a drink called sais, which he drank to the dregs. And this was probably the ritual drink of honey or milk, water, wine, and gruel, and perhaps some hypnotic drug. He donned the boots of Anubis, took up the shield of Isis, put on the cloak and cap of Orcus. He was handed a sword and told that he must cut off the head of the next person he met in a cave and bring it back to the king. This cave was pointed out to him. Entering it, he saw what seemed to be a beautiful woman, but in reality was a model of one. Now notice it's a woman. He seized this by the hair and severed the head. This he brought back to the monarch, who praised him, telling him that he had symbolically won the head of the Gorgon, wife of Typhon, who had caused the death of Osiris. He was now permitted always to wear the dress which had been given to him, and he was entered in a book as one of the judges of the land. Notice that, one of the judges of the land. He was able to communicate at any time with the king and received an allowance from the court. He was invested with an order, that of Isis in the shape of an owl, and it was revealed to him that the secret name of the great lawgiver was Joa, Joa, which was also the password of this degree. But the password for the meetings of the Christophori, as the 4th degree initiates were called, was Sassicus, The fifth degree, that of Balahate, could not now be refused to the Chrysophorus if he demanded or requested it. He was led to a hall to watch a play at which he was the only onlooker. Other members of the degree went through the hall as if looking for something. One drew his sword, and the terrible figure of Typhon appeared. Of course he was slain. And now the Dew Balahate was told that Typhon represented fire, a terrible element which was at the same time indispensable. The password was Chimia, and the teaching was in chemistry or alchemy. In order to become an astronomer of the Gate of the Gods, the sixth degree, the candidate was taken to the hall of assembly, bound and led to the gate of death. He was shown corpses which had been cast into water, and warned that he might be similarly treated if he broke his oath. He was given some teaching in astronomy and taken back to the Gate of the Gods, where he looked at the pictures of the gods while their histories were explained to him. A priestly dance took place, symbolizing the course of the heavenly bodies. He saw a list of members of the order throughout the world and learned the password Ibis for watchfulness. The last and the highest degree was that of Propheta, in which all secrets were laid bare. It was conferred following public processions, and when the permission of the king and all the highest members had been obtained, the members secretly left the city by night and retired to some houses built in a square and surrounded by pillars, by the sides of which were placed alternately a shield and a coffin, whose rooms were painted with representations of human life. Now these houses were called Maneras, for the people believed them to be visited by the manes of departed men. On their arrival at these houses, the new member, now called Prophet, or Saphanath Panka, a man who knows the secrets, was given a drink called oimelas, and told that now all trials were over. He received a cross of peculiar significance, which he was always to wear. He was clothed in a wide, white striped dress called itangi. The usual sign was crossing his arms in his wide sleeves. He could peruse all the sacred books written in the Ammonite language. His greatest privilege was having a vote in the election of a king, and the password was Adan. These mystical societies always continued, and one of special interest is the powerful society in Afghanistan in ancient times called the Roshaniya, or Illuminated Ones. There are actually references to this mystical cult going all the way back through history to the House of Wisdom at Cairo. The major tenets of this cult were the abolition of private property, the elimination of religion, the elimination of nation-states, the belief that illumination emanated from the Supreme Being who desired a class of perfect men and women to carry out the organization and direction of the world, belief in a plan to reshape the social system of the world by first taking control of individual countries one by one, and the belief that after reaching the fourth degree one could communicate directly with the unknown supervisors who had imparted knowledge to initiates throughout the ages. The Roshaniya also called themselves the Order. Initiates took an oath that absolved them of all allegiance except to the Order and stated, quote, "I bind myself to perpetual silence and unshaken loyalty and submission to the Order. All humanity which cannot identify itself by our secret sign is our lawful prey," unquote. The oath remains essentially the same to this day. The secret sign was to pass a hand over the forehead, palm inward, the countersign to hold the ear with the fingers and support the elbow in the cupped other hand. Does that sound familiar? If you sit in a courtroom in just about any city in this land, you will see those signs exchanged between lawyers and defendants and judges. And you will see that whenever these signs are exchanged, whoever initiated the exchange will usually, in fact, most often does, win the court case. The order, of course, is the order of the quest, and the cult preached that there was no heaven, no hell, only a spirit state completely different from life as we know it. The spirit could continue to be powerful on earth through a member of the order, but only if the spirit had been itself a member of the order before its death. Thus, members of the order gained power from the spirits of the dead members. The Roshaniya took in travelers as initiates and then sent them on their way to found new chapters of the order, and they were called fellow travelers. You see this order, as all before it, and all since, are socialists, communists. It is believed by some that the assassins were a branch of the Roshaniya. And branches of the Roshaniya are the illuminated ones, or the Illuminati, exist and still exist everywhere. One of the rules was not to use the same name and never mention, quote, Illuminati, unquote. That rule is still in effect today. And it's probably the breaking of that rule that resulted in Adam Weishaupt's downfall. Remember, folks, that we have really only just begun, and you are just beginning to understand, although some of you may think that you already understand. I can assure you that maybe a very small minority of you really do. Most do not. We have a long way to go in this history, and in your own particular individual illumination. Oh, I just love it. I just love it, exposing these people who claim that they're doing everything for the benefit of mankind, who really have all the guilt for most of everything bad that has ever happened to mankind resting squarely upon their shoulders. Now, if you'd like a packet of information, if you'd like to know how to join CAGI, if you'd like to purchase my book, or if you'd like to donate to pay for the airtime of this show, make a check or money order out to WWCR. That's to pay for the airtime. And send it to Stan, along with your request for information and whatever else that you may wish. Send it to Stan, P.O. Box 889, Camp Verde, Arizona, 86322. That's Stan, P.O. Box 889, Camp Verde, Arizona, 86322. Or you can call Stan, talk to him on the phone. He's a really wonderful guy. You'll enjoy it. Call him at 602-567-6109. That's 602-567-6109. Next time, folks, we're going to talk about the old man of the mountain. And we're going to continue the history of the order through the ages. Good night, and God bless you all.
Okay, so what we do now is I posted in the description box or in the chat for people who are on DLive or watching on DLive. So you can come in, we can discuss this. And afterwards, when we're done, if no one else is hosting, like James or Ryan, then I will host one. Even though I have been lacking sleep because my son is sick and he's still sick, so I'm going to have a hard day tomorrow too. But I'll sleep when I'm dead. And the way things look, it looks like they're going to try to kill us. Probably me too, just because what I'm doing here. So that's just that. But you know what? I don't subscribe to the to fear. Interesting thing before we go on, and while I'm waiting for people to come in, is my daughter. She's almost 5. She's at a daycare, and it's a very Christian daycare. There's another little girl. I think she's older than her. And her name's Lily. She punches her in the stomach or pinches her in the stomach, and along with other kids. The other kids report to the daycare teachers, but they don't seem to do anything because this girl keeps doing it. So tomorrow morning, and I asked my daughter, how long has this been going on? She says, since she was there. So this has been going on every day. And I noticed that because a difference, since she's been attending there, she hasn't been listening very well. And she seems to take it out on her mother. And I asked her today, is like, do you like it if when Lily punches you in the stomach or pinches you in the stomach? And she goes, no. And I go, do you want to take it out on others? And she goes, yes. And I go, no, you do not do that. So I told her, and my wife is like, doesn't like the things that I teach her, but I tell her, hey, if you get punched by her or pinched really hard on your stomach and you tell her to stop, you just hit her as hard as you can in the bridge of her nose and keep doing it until she stops. And if any teacher or any parent wants to, say, hey, that's wrong, well, have them talk to me, because I would do the same thing to an adult that does that. If it's a kid doing it, I wouldn't do that to a kid, but I would find that kid's father and probably do the same thing. You know why? Because the problem is the bullies that are the kids are most likely the ones who are taking out other kids because they're being bullied or hit the same way. Most likely the ones doing that are the parents. So most likely the father, maybe even the mother, are hitting that kid, and their kid is taking out on the other kids. So, oh yeah, there's gonna be hell to pay tomorrow morning when I go to daycare. And it's just gonna be, hey, I'm gonna give them a warning. I think I need to write up a letter to them saying, hey, if this doesn't stop and it's still occurring the day after, I'm gonna take lawful action. It's not gonna be bad. It's gonna be just to get the kid out. Have the parents have to find the kid a different daycare. And then if that doesn't happen and the kid still stays and the kid still pinches or punches my daughter, I'm going to sue the daycare. Pretty much that's it. And if nothing happens after that, I don't know. I'm in a new town. I'm pretty sure they don't like an Asian guy just coming in and telling them, hey, I don't like what you're doing here. They'll probably shut it down, judge or whoever. The cops, whatever, decide that they're above the law and just don't want to take any action, then I'm going to take action. That's just the way it is. And yeah, it's not great. But the thing is, a lot of religions, a lot of societies, a lot of parents are told, just ignore it. Just let it happen. And if you tattletale that you're getting hit or someone's doing something bad, then you're the one in trouble. That's how this world is the way it is, because we let this happen. We let people get away with it. Look at all the leaders that we have in our country alone. They do corrupt shit. You know what happens? We just ignore it. We let it happen. We don't do anything. The people who report on it, Snowden, Chelsea, Julian Assange, they report on it. They're the messengers, and they're the ones that get blamed. That's our society right now. So if they're going to hit back. If there's something called, if someone refers that Jesus turned the other cheek, there's also verses in the Bibles, even the New Testament, saying, Jesus got slapped by like a Roman guard or something like that, and he didn't turn the other cheek. He said, hey, if I'm wrong, then prove me wrong. If I'm right, then why'd you slap me? And pretty much contested that. Didn't turn the other cheek. great thing about that part, I think that part was telling that Jesus was saying that, hey, I do everything in the open. I don't hold any private meetings or private like Bible sessions, whatever you want to call it. It's all in the open. Anyone can attend. That was the contention that I gotta find that Bible verse. I'm pretty haven't studied religion in a long time. It's kind of going back to it, and it's not really studying. I'm just kind of listening to other people who studied religion and just kind of referencing them. So, and the thing is, Christianity, or not just Christianity, but all religions have been usurped by these Gnostics, these, if you want to call them Luciferians, whatever you want to call them, all the religions. So, I mean, even our history, even our history has been usurped. They control it all. I live in a smallish town, stable, progressive genius. Yeah, the Zoom chat's open, Perseus. You may have to refresh your YouTube. Excuse me, your YouTube screen. If you're watching through YouTube, if you're in Steemit, it should be in the chat. I will go ahead and post it again on the live chat in YouTube, so you can just click on that and it should bring you in. Sorry for the late start. I want to start at 10 p.m. Central Standard Time, but you know, sometimes I can't. Hey, how's it going, Perseus? Let's do a quick mic check. I can't if you want to talk.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, it's a little low. Can you increase it?
Are you talking about the elevation of the camera or the volume?
Oh, the volume. Volume's good now.
Okay. Actually, I think I'm going to turn the camera off right now because where I'm sitting, the glare's like right there.
That's right. There's tons of glare here. oh, glare into your camera. Okay. So what did you think about this this hour of the time? Gnosticism.
Well, I've done a little bit of research on Gnosticism myself in the past. I find really interesting about it, not that I necessarily believe in the ideology myself. I think that, okay, you're probably going to convince a lot of people that you're right if you're going around saying, oh, the world is shit, oh, all physical matter is bad, especially living in like more primitive times with less access to medicine and less actual genuine understanding of the world and what's happening around you. So I can see how people would be like, oh, I'm one of the special ones now. I get to know the actual shit that's going on, while also this eschewing of the physical. I find that that's like a recurring thing in it. But I find that, you know, for an ideology that actually goes about making change in the world, they sure do care a lot about the actual comings and goings of the physical world, almost to the point where I would say it's almost a subversion that they're saying that that's not what matters.
So basically it's a lie.
Well, yeah, I mean, think of it this way, okay? They go through all these elaborate rituals, and yeah, you can say, okay, that's just part of creating the effect, and you're trying to bring about this, you know, group belonging stuff. But they put all their effort towards trying to control things in the physical world. So obviously the physical world matters to them for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they keep saying, oh, it's beneath us. No. Well, it just seems like it seems disingenuous in the same way that I found that, okay, look, listening about the actual like initiation rites they were talking about with all this, oh, go into the cave and oh, do this. And then all these tests that are specifically like, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to test you about these things. And if you don't have the responses that we want, you know, all of this has been for nothing. We're probably going to, you know, off you or something for knowing too much at this point. But I find it interesting that, okay, so you've got this guy, you've spent the last 4 months initiating him through all these things. He's going down into the cave with you, all this kind of stuff. You're breaking him down as an individual. You're cutting him off from social contact. you're putting them in this bad environment and you're expecting perfection out of them. And then they're going to do things like go off the script and like, oh, this guy's going to faint swinging an axe at your head, but he's not, he's just going to tap you. And, you're supposed to ritually insult him and his reaction. You've been primed for it to be one reaction, but he could do something else. All of this kind of stuff, it doesn't seem to bring any clarity. It just seems, in my opinion, like it would be more nerve-wracking on the individual. And maybe they want to weed out people who don't have a strong enough nerve, but there are way more efficient ways you could do it than what all of this, like, it really just, to me, strikes the idea that, okay, so back in those days, people had a lot of time to sit around, because if it wasn't the specific times of year, you do specific tasks, there's nothing you can really do.
Especially the winter time.
Yeah. So it seems like something that is a drawn out process just because of the realities of time in those days. People are entertaining themselves with this. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing that I noticed really important when it talked about a play with no audience. No, the audience is the play. This is recurring in a lot of pagan traditions. But personally, I don't consider Gnosticism a form of paganism. It's too closely intertwined with Abrahamic thought for me to consider it pagan. But in pagan rituals, there are a lot of plays that you're supposed to be physically embodying the god that you're acting as in that moment. Okay, it's a recurring thing. So
saying
that there's a play going on. Yes. So the idea is that if there's some play going on, I suppose there could be symbolism there that if all the other people are acting like they can't see it, and the one who's like the chosen initiate is the one observing it and everyone behaves like they can't, that's supposed to also be symbolic of them being like having revealed knowledge and everyone else is just blind. But the actual, the embodying of the archetype, that crops up quite a lot.
Yeah. For people who are just joining or didn't get to watch the whole thing, so this episode was on Gnosticism, meaning it's esoteric knowledge. Esoteric meaning it's just knowledge intended for a select few. I'm not sure about you, Perseus. Me, a couple of people here are probably agnostic, meaning nothing is known. And one of the things is I think this group, whatever it is, this religion, usurped all the other religions out there. Rather than killing off all the religions, just like killing off all the people that they didn't like within in a territory of land, it's just more powerful to convert them. And I've had the same sentiment, because if you kill one, you're just going to make an enemy. You convert one, you're gaining an ally. And no one's going to go after you, right? So being conversion, which we all know, it typically happens with religion. And so religion conversion is a big thing. And I think they'll want to take control of the Abrahamic religions. They want to take control of paganism. They want to take control of Hinduism, Buddhism. They just want to take control of every type of religion. And that's just a form of control. And when you're talking about them kind of lying, so it's basically we see this all around every religion, because there's just the majority of people on earth are poor. Materialistically, they're poor. And there's a lot of religions out there that are saying, hey, you don't want to be religious or you don't want to be rich, because rich doesn't get you in heaven. Rich doesn't make you become the next Buddha. You can't reach the good point of an afterlife if you're rich. So be poor, give your money away. Hey, give your money to the church. God needs the money. Sorry, I'm being a little bit sarcastic, but
I never thought of it that way. That's a really good way of looking at it, though. I always looked at it just from the perspective of trying to get like the common people to keep their heads down, not so much in like in an economic sense, but the idea is that, okay, so you're someone whether or not you have legitimate authority, you see yourself as someone who's steering the ship of state for some group of people. Let's just say there's some group of 100,000 people, and this is like a few thousand years ago, you're in charge of them. Okay. Mm-hmm. If all of them are going to independently be doing their own thing, you're going to run into problems in the sense that, okay, so people are ignorant, you don't have good literacy. A statement like good literacy, I guess, isn't very good literacy. But the point is that you have all of these largely ignorant people. You want them to keep their heads down so that you can, for their own good, stay in charge of them. You don't want them independently starting stuff with people from the neighboring country because it might screw up a treaty that you have with their leader, and that's all that's keeping, war between you and them breaking up. I can understand reasons why you would want to control people in such a way and have them all just keep their head down. But I think that structurally, you're just going to have to, if there's no incentive for them, if all you can do is, okay, delayed gratification until you're dead, you'll be rewarded in the afterlife. We don't have to give you anything up front. If that's really the strategy you're going to use, I really don't think people are going to fall for that anymore, at least not in the modern world. I think there's a reason why the religions that are currently waning are waning because, are you familiar with like the term pre and post axial age religions?
No, I don't.
Okay, so there was this specific period of time that lasted about 100 years at the start of the Iron Age. It was post-Bronze Age collapse, but the Iron Age was really only just getting started. Okay. You see a reformation of the Vedas into the Hindu. So you see an evolution of Hinduism out of the precursor beliefs that it came out of. You see a Confucian restoration in China. You see the Abrahamic religions really taking hold in the Middle East. And you see, what was the fourth religious reformation that happened at the same time? But all of these were as a response to higher population densities and an increased literacy in the Iron Age compared to the Bronze Age, and the collapse of the warrior aristocracies that had maintained power using religious oppression, more or less, in their societies prior to that. Because
Confucianism came much later than the start of the Bronze Age, right?
He's talking about start of the
Iron. No, I'm talking about the start of the Iron Age. Yeah,
the Iron, even later than the Iron Age. In fact, Confucianism started. China had iron implements by the time Confucianism rolled around.
Well, keep in mind, I'm not using the term Iron Age in the sense of a global thing. I'm referring to the conditions in the Mediterranean.
Okay.
But what I'm getting at is that, here, hold on. I can just bring up the thing I was looking at it earlier. So this axial age. So just search this term and it'll give the list of religious things that I'm talking about. Maybe I'm not perfectly quoting it right now. But the point is that at this particular point in history, a lot of what I guess you would call the religions that dominated during the Bronze Age, they started waning specifically because of the changing conditions. There are a lot of people who associate it with all this mystical things, but I think it more or less just has to do with the fact that the messages that they were teaching weren't relevant to the people anymore, and certain religions reformed and other religions just went under. And a lot of new religions cropped up at the exact same period.
Okay.
Well, as far as go ahead.
Oh, no, actually, no, continue with what you were going to say.
Well, as far as, the effect religion has on people in the modern age, and to tie it back to what, you were discussing, I think, the Masonic rituals, some sorts of rituals, with the axe and whatnot. And in the modern age, those rituals have lost their potency because no one's going to kill you. Like, back when they, let's say there were Masonic lodges in Sicily and Naples and in France and a lot of these places, and the rituals would kill you. There was a lot of people who didn't come out of those things alive once you got into the higher levels. So it was the shock of, a threat to your life that imprinted whatever lesson that they wanted to impose upon you. I mean, you were talking about how it would make people anxious and whatnot. Well, that was the whole point. A near-death experience, like something very scary, will imprint things on you, especially if you're not very well educated or, some of these people were educated by the standards of their time, but still they didn't know what the hell was going on. So,
well, why didn't they just use magic mushrooms like any rational modern person would use to do the exact same thing?
Well, a lot of people didn't really know about psychedelics or magic mushrooms or anything like that. These things were pagan. Like the Vikings and what have you would use muscaria mushrooms to go nuts. And of course, like we see in other parts of the world, these traditions, but Europe really didn't have that kind of a tradition about it during the, throughout most of its history. They weren't really, it was all witchcraft. I mean, the church purged a lot of that knowledge from society.
So the one thing that I want to say, I've been wanting to say it for a while, because Bob Mersma was saying, yeah, pagan does not mean what people seem to think it does. Romans often refer to Hebrews, for example, as pagans. I think when we get to the point, or any group gets to the point, and it's an ideology just of telling a group of people that aren't part of your group what they are, we get into problems. Because if that's kind of the thing with the Luciferians or Illuminati or the Gnostics, is that they call everyone else the profane. For us, again, with at least me or whatever, the Catholic Church would probably call me a heretic, or the Jesuits, whatever you prefer. The thing is, why can't I just say what I am, which is agnostic? And they won't accept that term, because it's just an ideological, you're either with us or you're against us thing. And that's what we've got to watch out for. And that's been happening a lot recently.
Exactly. That's the bad part about religion, is the in-grouping and the out-grouping. Mm-hmm. Like, it has a tendency, like many religions have a tendency to in-group and out-group. And, that can be exploited for material gains. Whether you're talking about raising or just ripping people off through televangelism.
Does it really have to do with just religion, or is that just human nature to in-group and out-group on its own? Like, it to me, it seems like with any situation, you're going to have to resort to it to one degree or another, maybe not to an extreme. Because how do you actually protect the people in your in-group if you don't have a very clearly defined set? Like, you can't possibly be everything for everyone. I think that type of, the universalist kind of, this message is for everyone, good news type of stuff is really, that just opens yourself up to the type of infiltration that Ebon was talking about earlier, saying that, well, it's clear that certain other religions have been subverted by Gnostic philosophy, I guess you could put it that way, and like actual individuals who are like Freemasons or whatnot. So how do you protect from other hostile groups without having a clearly defined in and out group? Like, is it possible?
Well, I'm not saying that all in-grouping and out-grouping is bad, because distinctions have to be made. Okay. And you're right that in-grouping and out-grouping is an inherent human trait, and that it manifests itself through religion rather than religion being the cause. It's a symptom, right, of in-grouping and out-grouping tendencies in people as humans. But what it tends to do is it tends to, again, exacerbate the negative aspects of in-grouping and out-grouping. And, to be fair, it also enhances some of the more positive aspects of that tendency.
So I just want to chime in real quick. So the United States is the grand experiment where it's freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of whatever. It's just the land of the free. That's what we're about. But and that's how you control it, because whenever it's not one against, if you're not with us, you're against us. It's no, you have your religion and you have your religion. They have their religion. They have their religion. And just because they're not your religion doesn't mean that they're all wrong, or one religion, the others are all wrong.
This is a gaming term, I know, but when you have a situation like that, then people are going to start metagaming the environment that they're in, and they're going to change their religion or ideology into something that can exploit that openness. That, I think, is what has happened in our society.
Yeah.
So how do you, is it even possible to prevent that without becoming that yourself? I guess is the question I'm asking, if you think that.
Well, are people rational? Again, it comes down to that question. Are they rational enough to get a hold of some of these, hardwired impulses to the point where, yes, you can in-group and out-group, and it doesn't have to turn into a fucking bloodbath, and you can in-group and out-group, and you don't have to be a fucking sheep either. You know what I'm saying? Like, people
Yeah,
need...
I don't have a lot of confidence in the general public's ability to do that.
Yeah, either do I, unfortunately.
It's almost like if there are these three smart guys like us sitting here, we could have this discussion, away from where all those stupid people were, and we could make some sort of plan to do something about it.
I wouldn't say stupid.
That's in-grouping and out-grouping, dude.
They're intelligent. It's just that they've just been so, in our terms, we would say brainwashed, because they listen to what we're talking about and they just turn it off. It's just conspiracy theory territory.
Well, that's what I mean, though. If you think about it, let's say that this wasn't being broadcast and it was just like a closed stream. We would, if we actually did that, we would literally be engaged in a conspiracy. You know what I mean? Like, because it's like being broadcast, that isn't the case. But
well, we're not planning to do anything. So, is it a conspiracy, or is it just a discussion about?
Oh yeah, it could become. It could easily become a conspiracy. Is what I'm saying. It's just like with we'd have to come up with a set of actual trials that people would have to go through, though, before we could see if they're worthy enough to participate, though. I think that'd be
Step 1, give me all your money. Step 2, give me your wife.
Yeah, you need to donate 10% of your Bitcoin before you can join. Yeah. But it's amazing because I don't know whether it's the YouTube algorithms, and I'm starting to put it back on Steam now that I have my computer set up, as you can see. Whether people will eventually find me on DLive and join and participate, because I feel like YouTube stymies a lot of groups, a lot of channels, and so I have a feeling that maybe other people that finally find my show and know that there's you just join, you can talk as long as you're not like taking away someone else's time to talk, or no hate stuff, obviously illegal stuff. I mean, I'd like to keep my channel, but I mean, typically just talk about any viewpoint that you want, and that's the thing. Perseus, you say that you're labeled as alt-right, or you're in that area of it, like the left, or the so-called left, or whatever you want to call it, the Me Too left. I don't know what you would call them, or centrists. They would just not want to talk to you, just because of that labeling.
Well, I think it's funny too, because the thing is like, I'm not somebody who sits there like wringing my hands so happy, oh, I'm in the alt-right. No, that isn't even how it works. I don't even like the fact that I like fascism. I just think it's the only pragmatic solution at this tight stage in the game for how things are going. It's like, I don't celebrate the fact that, oh, this horrible ideology that's basically all war all the time, like there's no room for anything else. I don't like that that's how the world works, but I think that that's just pragmatic. Yeah. Like,
so you're the accelerationist. You know that, yes, pretty much it's going to happen. Might as well get it over with so we can, hit that reset button.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think the Dalai Lama said something about it. If you're in a situation where violence is absolutely unavoidable, you should act with as much force as quickly as possible to prevent future violence.
There's a lot of philosophies that say that.
But I think applying that on a wide scale in the modern era leads to death of the planet.
Because, in terms of like nuclear holocaust?
Well, in terms of WMD holocaust of various sorts. Also, you could say the same if you're going to talk about violence. You could say that resource acquisition is a type of violence. And You know, I mean, just aside from the human cost of it, like you're committing a type of violence on the world when you do something to enhance climate change or accelerate climate change, for example. That's what I'm referring. That's another, you know.
But here's where I like seeing
What?
your point, Garden, and seeing Perseus's point, because um, if we're just trying to not have the most suffering, right? Because the nuclear holocaust is going to kill a lot of people fast. There's going to be some suffering, but you know they'll die within months, years, as opposed to this drawn out process where more and more people are becoming homeless, more and more people are becoming sick, and they can't afford the health to get treated. More people are just can't even eat good food or drink clean water. So and their life is just going to be miserable, and it's this long suffering process of years, not decades, before they end up dying. So which one is
that's the way the Gnostics want you to think, though, that you can't fall into that trap, because then you'd be complicit with your own extermination or depopulation.
Well, a philosophy like that assumes that there's going to be a recovery period afterwards, like there has been in previous periods of history after the fall of empires. That's not going to happen this time. If the empires crash the way they did in the past, in our modern era, the world will end because of our level of technology.
Oh, you're
like there will
like
be no afterward recovery period where like we accelerate the process, get the shit over with, and then start the rebuilding process. It won't work like that if we use an accelerate the stressors philosophy. Not in this era, it won't. The weapons and the technology
is unattended nuclear. Are you saying that the technology would be used intentionally? Or are you talking about like if there was a social collapse, 6 months go by, no nuclear power plant, that it melted down kind of thing?
Again, it wouldn't matter whether it was an intentional or not. Like if the more stressors that you put on this system, the more likely it is to break.
So are you saying that
it breaks, like it, whether it's someone intentionally smashing it with a hammer, or whether like, you know, like regulations go to complete shit, the country's broke and they can't maintain their nuke plants, and then they begin to break down. I mean, it doesn't matter either way, whether it was intentional or not.
Wait, so Gardner, are you saying right now we've passed that threshold that no matter what, it's either going to be, hey, we got to fix this, or it's nuclear holocaust, or it's
we got to fix this, or it's some kind of holocaust? Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean I think that we are quickly approaching the singularity, and I guess that's the main source of anxiety when it comes to that kind of thing for me. I always figured we'd wipe ourselves out by creating some kind of machine we can't control properly, but all kinds of things are open to possibilities. Like, you know, some kind of next level biological warfare going on, all kinds of stuff.
And
nanotech.
Yeah. So something interesting that Esoteric Ed, Outer Light, Outer Dark, if you watch his stuff or listen to his stuff. So he just kind of revealed that scientists that research theoretical physics, maybe not theoretical, quantum physics, sorry, quantum electrodynamics, that they studied the double slit experiment, and they realized that it's true. It's kind of like if so reality doesn't exist until you experience it. So one of the things is it's kind of difficult to explain. A lot of people do this experiment, which is they'll just get distilled water, 2 jars, one with and fill it with rice, so they're both equal. They're actually, you would do it with 3. One is your control, so they're all the same, distilled water, like no sunlight, and all 3 of them, you can put them in like 3 separate cupboards that are the same size, whatever. One you would just leave alone, that's your control. One you would just put all your hate or your anger, either emotionally or silently, or vocally, or both. And in the other one, you just put your love, your joy, and your happiness in, same thing. And you would do this every day, and you would just kind of take pictures of it throughout the process. And you look at it after like the end of a month or 2 months, you'll see that the control is just a little bit, has some buildup of bacteria or whatever it is. And you've got your anger jar, and that one's just really bad. And then you've got your happy one, and it's like clean. And you can look at it. I'll show it in a bit. We're sharing the screen. And everyone it's kind of been a craze a couple years ago, and still doing that now, where a lot of people are just repeating the same experiment, making videos on it, and the outcome is the same. And if this is true, and this isn't, and that's the thing, is Bill Cooper said he believes in magic, that he's experienced it. But I'm held to the thinking that magic is just what people call when they don't understand the scientific concepts of it. So a lot of people would call it magic, but we've got it's based off of theoretical physics of quantum electrodynamics. So, I mean, is that crazy?
Well, I would suggest performing the experiment yourself.
Because here's the thing, because if it is true, why other than just the fear of just, everyone being afraid of power and what's going on, because it's the mainstream media likes to perpetuate a lot of fear of society, but also there's a lot of hate now. I mean, they're just trying to just rile up people just to get them angry, either at Trump or at Russia or, Black Lives Matter or neo-Nazis, or, they're just trying to get people angry. And things just get worse when people are just angry, full of hate, and not just fear, and then you've got others like, I don't know, I'm one of them that, I don't want to try to sprout fear. I want to sprout just at least hope, but knowledge that, it's a hard life. It's going to be a hard battle. There's always going to be hard battles, but you just got to do what it takes to overcome it, but try not to become what you've always hated. Just try to be good to one another. And then, but if there's someone that's being bad to you, you respond quickly and saying that's not right. And, you just have to end it quickly, because otherwise it just festers, it lingers, and it gets worse. And if you hold back, they just take advantage of you. They know they can take advantage of you, especially the people who, like I said earlier, before you guys came on, we let people get away with stuff, ignore it. That's just the right thing to do in society. So we get all the corrupt people getting away with it and repeating it. And you got the people who are reporting it that gets not vindicated. They get
persecuted.
There you go. Sorry, I took up a lot of time talking about that. I'm going to share the screen real quick for that experiment.
As far as Gnosticism goes, a lot like mainstream, Christianity, early Christianity, whatever you want to call it. Like it started as a blend of like pagan and these quasi-Christian beliefs, right? Like the original Gnostics believed that God was unknowable, and that he was he wasn't really aware of our universe. And our universe was under the command of something called the demiurge. And what this thing would do is it just enjoyed suffering and torment. And that's why the world is full of suffering and torment. But it was a strange mixture. And to go back to an earlier episode of this, one of the reasons the Templars got persecuted was because of their association with Gnostic beliefs. A lot of Templars began to adopt some of these Gnostic beliefs. And the church didn't like that. The Gnostic church actually started to present a real threat to the Catholic Church in some ways.
Okay, there's actually I have a really thing before I forget it about the video that's on right here. Okay, so this hate jar is full of rot, right?
Yep.
Isn't it a cultural or a social judgment call to say that rot itself isn't just a bloom of beautiful life that has every same right to exist as us? And why is it automatically bad? Is the hate not feeding that life form, and it's thriving off of that strong, powerful emotion? Like you could make the argument that life is thriving inside of that jar. The fact that it's inconvenient to humans is a judgment call.
True. You got a
Very
good point
true.
there.
Like, and they've done experiments with plants, of course, where if you scream at a plant like every day for a year or whatever, it withers. And then if you praise and, talk softly to a plant, it does better. So maybe these molds are similar in a sense.
I mean, one of the Gnostics' beliefs is that to achieve peace, you have to pretty much kill everyone. And then there you go. You got peace on earth.
Well, that's kind of where the Catholic prohibition against suicide came from. It came along fairly early in the church because people were like, fuck it. Like, why am I waiting?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if you listened before, Perseus, but I mentioned another thing that religions do. Same thing with cults and society and certain secret societies is they make you repent for Catholicism, or I think for certain cults and religions like Scientology, you have to give something where they'll reveal to the public if you
mm-hmm.
So that's just kind of another condition that this type of secret societies or control groups tend to do is they try to learn all your dirty secrets, so they keep you in control by
and it's even more fiendish than that, in my opinion, because at the same time it's subconsciously going to make you appreciate them because they're someone that because you're willing to confide in them, you get the positive emotional feedback that, oh, I have someone who cares enough to listen. Whereas I guess in Scientology, they're very upfront about the fact that they're going to use it to blackmail you. But in like the more traditional, I guess, like Catholic confessional kind of way, you would appreciate being able to alleviate that to them. So that not only are you getting blackmail material on them, but you're making them love you for it at the same time.
Yeah, it's true. Well, you get into heaven, right? By repenting. That's also another reward. And also, I think you're right on about that. It's almost in the neutral part, but think about the Patriot Act, where screw the Fifth Amendment or whatever it is. If you're doing nothing wrong, them spying on you isn't going to do anything bad. It shouldn't matter to you, type of thing, right?
Oh, of course not. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Well, you obviously know the correct answer to this. I don't think anyone here needs it explained. But it's just, what's to say that what you're already doing now that's legal won't be retroactively made illegal? Like, people don't stop and think about these things every day.
Yeah. And so it's, I mean, for me, it's the basis of, here's the thing about religion, is if you really believe in your religion and you're going to be rewarded in your death into the next life, that's your belief that how you live now is going to be based on what you're going to end up with after you're dead, is that you shouldn't be afraid. People who are religious shouldn't be afraid if they really believe. For agnostics like me, we don't know. I mean, the greatest fear is the unknown. For me, everything is unknown until it's known, and I'm not afraid. I'm okay with dying. I'm okay with people coming over and trying to take me out. I'm going to do what I can to take them out first, but I'm ready for it. It's just part of life.
Well, where were you before you were born, dude?
Well, yeah, but before getting to that part, I'm just saying that If someone like me who doesn't believe in anything, isn't afraid, people who really believe in a religion where they're going to go to heaven, they shouldn't be afraid. They should not be a hypocrite. They should speak out, show their faces, and just do what I'm doing at least, and just know that, you know, it doesn't matter what happens to them, that what's wrong is wrong, and they're just going to fight it. Otherwise, what good is their religion?
Well, their
Sorry.
religion can't overcome the program, the genetic programming that says you be afraid of death. Like, and if some people it can. Like, you see Buddhist monks burn themselves alive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've overcome it. But 99.9% of people can't overcome it, even if they really believe. When they're faced with death, they will have a negative reaction. So they, you know, you can't
I'm not
believe.
saying.
Is it hypocrisy, or is it just that they're hardwired and they can't help it?
Yeah, I'm hardwired too. I'm not saying I'm like totally fearless of death. There's still fear, but I'm not afraid to confront the possibility of it. I mean, we all die sometime. What matters is how we live, right?
Yeah, and like I said, where were you before you were born? Like, I don't remember anything before then.
Yeah.
Like, I guess I'm just going to go back to being that way at some point. I just don't want to suffer during that process, like, of going back to that.
What are your thoughts on that, Perseus?
What specifically the where we were before we were born?
Well, that too. Also,
the same. Okay, as far as that goes, I don't know. I don't think that I've overcome my fear of death. That's definitely something that I have to work on. As far as that goes, like, I don't know. I've actually been thinking about it quite a lot recently. What is it called? I think I mentioned to you before in an email. My grandmother's not doing the best right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been thinking a lot about mortality.
Well, you know, I mean, do all systems have a level of awareness? And to what degree are systems separate? I mean, from a certain point of view, like, we're just a cloud of these particles, right? And another cloud of particles, and we're basically indistinguishable from what's around us. And it's always been that way. It was that way before you were born, and like, these particles and this energy has come together. If time works the way that some people think it does, and time and space works the way some people think it does, it seems to exceed our understanding and seems to be infinite, which means that all these patterns and all these clouds of particles, energy, and matter are just going to repeat themselves over and over. And
hold the fort. I gotta. My son's up and not sleeping, so I gotta make sure he's okay. I'll be back.
So, I don't know. You can't be too worried about death. You can't really think about it too much, although it's difficult not to when you're faced with certain circumstances.
So you I'm not sure if I understood this correctly, but do you know anything about the electron field? This specifically about no two electrons can occupy the same energy state, but that would imply, and if you change the energy state of one electron, the rest of them all shift in accordance with it. Mm-hmm. So wouldn't that imply that all electrons everywhere in the universe are in contact with one another continuously? Is this just a function of their nature, or is there a coordination being taken place?
Yeah, and then we're starting to get into things like quantum entanglement too, like we were discussing about, the double slit theory before. I mean, what are the implications of the electron field and things like quantum entanglement? Can we perceive time correctly? Or do we just perceive it in a way that allows us to move through the world as a object, so to speak? These are questions that people
well, yeah, I mean,
they don't know. Like, they don't know the implications of these things. And given our limited understanding, it's hard to even tell if the data we're seeing is correct.
Okay, so how's this then? So working on the assumption that the Big Bang is accurate. I don't know. Like, who knows, really? But let's just work on that assumption, okay? So if we're moving towards, quote, the future through space-time, is that just the direction that so for example, let's say a galaxy that formed out of matter moving in the opposite direction from the Big Bang. Is it moving in the same direction of time as us, or is it moving in a totally different direction through time?
Well, then we're going to start getting into questions about gravity, right? Because let's say that the black hole in the center of that galaxy is a lot more dense than ours. Like, their time will be different just on that basis alone. So then when you add this other variable onto it, then, you know, it's difficult to tell. Like, we don't have like the data we get about other galaxies is billions of years old, right?
And it might not even and here's the thing, I've always figured this is a possibility, that the actual, in a literal sense, the shape of the universe is something that our eyes can't actually perceive properly because of the scope and the scale of it. So, you know, are we on the three-dimensional face of a higher dimensional object, and we're trapped on that particular facing of it? Or, you know, all of these other, I guess there's really no way to actually verify any of that, is there?
Well, that's like M theory, where like we're on these layers of a bubble, or like a concentric series of bubbles, really. And, you know, we float on like the tops of these bubbles. And when the bubbles pop, that's what a Big Bang is. And one layer of reality, in part or in whole, collapses upon another. And that causes a new like bubble to form.
And would the laws between these various bubbles be consistent, or would they be derived from some higher order of laws that would be? So, for example, if the surface tension of one of these bubbles is different between one and another, would that have an effect on the laws within it, or would it have no effect?
That's a question that a lot of people ask. Okay, because M theory was kind of derived from string theory, and one difference between and I'm not a physicist, okay, but one difference, as I understand it, between string theory and M theory is exactly that in string theory, like when you vibrate a certain string, the note is going to be consistent when you hear it. If you hit like a string that's been tuned to a certain tone, right? Now, like, so all of the things along that string would have the same rules of physics and a similar physical laws, right? But with M theory, that's not necessarily the case, because like you said, like the tension along these different layers, they're not really connected in a sense until they pop, so they can be very different. Do you see what I mean by that?
And then, yes, and I guess when it comes to tying it back to religion, I guess it would come down to, if you're having a, quote, spiritual experience, are you having an experience chemically in your own brain? Are you in contact with something that's from one of these other layers of reality that we're not normally tapped into because of the chemical difference in your brain? I guess it's the whole, is your brain I guess what I'm getting at is similar to but not, it's distinct enough to not be exactly what I mean, but is your brain a receiver or is it a transmitter? If you ever heard that analogy before. Like,
can we contact other, like, can we perceive time and space differently?
Yeah,
like at certain times?
Let's say, let me put it this way. Let's say you're on DMT, okay? Is that DMT tapping you into something that would be there if you weren't on DMT, or is it only there because you're on DMT?
I think that as far as drugs, it really is very dependent on the individual. Like, for some individuals, drugs like DMT and LSD will awaken parts of their mind that, would not have been awakened otherwise. Now, this can be a good or a bad thing. For some people, it's an enlightening experience, and for other people, it's a very frightening experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, Is there, if you're talking about having like these things opening up to like another form of objective reality, like another layer of the bubble or the string, is that what you mean?
Well, kind of. Like, so just for example, like I've done some experiments with entheogenics before, but ever since then, so I used to, when I was like a really little kid, I would always have these closed and opened eye visuals, but it basically went away. And I kind of grew out of it, kind of forgot about it for a bunch of years. But it would be more or less just manifest in all these colored spots I would see everywhere, especially on flat blank surfaces, or like when my eyes were closed when I was trying to go to sleep. But anyway, that went away for a really long time. But then when I started doing like psychedelic drugs again, or not again, but like when I started doing them, this came back, and I can't even close my eyes anymore without seeing a field of pattern and color and movement that I more or less can control. And when I first started doing it, I could control it, but only when I was high. But now, even when I'm sober, I always see it there when my eyes are closed. And I have the complete ability to, not like with fine, precise detail, but like change the color of the dots, make them move in a different direction, spin the opposite way, divide vertically, horizontally, or into 3 segments, that kind of stuff. Just mentally, like flexing muscles in my brain I didn't know I had, I guess, is the only analogy I can think of. And ever since I started doing that, it's like I can't turn it off anymore. It's like it's always on.
It's the monkey mind.
Sir, can you
It's
guys
the wild
catch
horse.
me up real quick on the topic?
Well, we were
I was
talking
just
about
talking
like physics, and now we're talking about psychedelic drugs.
Okay.
But I just, because I always, like, I don't know, what, I guess I kind of lost my train of thought there.
So one thing before, if we want to dive off into open topic, but this Gnosticism is kind of an esoteric process. We noticed that a lot of deaths occur when people try to reveal the truth. But right now, in this day and age of disinformation, why would they still kill people who reveal the truth? I mean, it feels like to kill someone now kind of proves that what they're revealing is true. So that kind of gives, it's kind of, everything's upside down now. Some people call it mirror world, upside down world. That now they'll just tell you the truth of what's going on.
Well,
no one will believe.
That's one of the reasons why I actually recommended Randall Carlson. I can't remember where he said it, but I seem to specifically recall him talking about him giving away a lot of like stuff like he's a high level Mason and he's giving stuff away. And at first he thought was like, oh, this is probably going to be controversial, but nobody seems to care. And from the way he phrased it, I think what he was trying to say is that, now keep in mind, this could all be a disinformation campaign on his part too. So keep that in mind. Mm-hmm. But the way he explained it is that these traditions won't survive if people who don't care about this kind of thing don't learn them, because most people who are learning them now don't give a shit and they're just putting up with it so they can stay there for other reasons. Like the way he phrases it, the majority of people in the Masons don't give a crap about any of that stuff.
I mean, I could kind of see that. They just like what it gives them.
Yeah.
It's right. Like a business or organization in most towns, or social, or like an Elks Lodge or something. That's how it is in most towns.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think when you're in there,
around here, it's like that.
And it's not hard to kind of judge a person's not just mentality, but their just kind of what they can handle, what they would be able to handle, just by being in a society or talking with them and going over and giving them like an assignment and how they handle that assignment, just their moral judgment or their moral compass or their flexibility and things like that. So, I'm pretty sure that the people who are up heading these lodges and kind of the master of the lodge or whatever, they just kind of know who can probably go up, because they themselves had to go up. And so you're probably going to be a decent judge of character to see who's probably going to make it and who's not. It's just kind of like being a coach of like a sports team, like where a kid can handle.
Or are you implying that a lot of them probably don't care because they've already reached their maximum level they're going to reach, and so they lose interest in that aspect of it? But you're saying that the people who do make their way up probably would care?
Yeah. For example.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Well, for example, is like some people just want to be like a millionaire and just live life okay. And when they're called on to do something for another member, they just do it because they just know that they'll get benefits. But then they won't want to be into like pedophile stuff or like sacrifice stuff. And like, hey, dude, I'm not into that. But hey, call on me and I'll support you because I like that money or whatever. And then you got other people who are just power hungry. They'll do anything and they just want more. They don't care what happens. They know they're protected, so why not? So it's almost you get that, you just have that sense of someone who really is ambitious and someone who really isn't. And again, that's just hardwired human factors, like Noam would put it.
Well, this is a basic social structure, dude. You have like some kind of fucking leader, and he's moving people up through the ranks, and blah blah fucking blah. Yeah. I mean, it's a good model. Don't get me wrong, like, but we got to make some adjustments to it because it's fucked up, and it's the reason why we're in this fucked up position.
Well, I mean, I guess that's the thing. What was the name of? I'm trying to remember the name of the channel. Wasn't the Caspian Report? They were talking about a distinction between why historically a lot of Muslim empires have fallen apart internally, and it had to do with an overvalue of loyalty versus capability when it came to choosing when it came to promotion patterns. And I'm trying to remember the specific caliphate so I don't sound like an idiot. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, so I don't want to say the wrong one. But he was talking about consistently you have people appointing their brothers and cousins into positions they're not qualified for because of this loyalty factor. And I find that particularly like when people are talking about like the pedogate type stuff, you know, the only reason I can see, unless they're like actually is some sort of other like ritual purpose, the reason that they would want their members doing this is so they can blackmail each other, like in like a Mexican standoff blackmail, I guess. And I guess to prove ruthlessness. But at the same time, it just seems like there are other ways they could do it, but I guess that wouldn't be ruthless enough. They'd have to make it as bad as possible just for the sake of, I don't know, making the person that's trying to get something from them prove something to them, I guess. Like, it's a screwed up way of going about it, but...
Yeah. I mean, that a lot of people, it's kind of been exposed when George W. Bush, and a lot of people call it like crony capitalism or cronyism. And it makes sense. I mean, that a lot of people marry off their daughters or whatever to their enemies just to join forces and stuff like that in the past. But
I mean, it never works in the long run, though. Like, cronyism always results in an eventual collapse of the system because you don't have enough competent people being competent often enough. There's no reward structure for it.
Yeah. We're seeing the results of it now.
Mm-hmm.
This is tribalism, you know, like, this man's my brother, I don't care what he does. And that gets transferred on to the people you command.
Yeah.
And your quote brother, like your friend who became king, in other words, like he's given you 10,000 men. And so you pick people who are loyal and then down the fucking chain it goes.
Oh,
so you got 10,000 people doing something like killing a city full of innocent people.
So I'm not sure if you guys ever watched the thing that I did before. It was just restreaming someone else's show, kind of a historical outtake on Yi Sun Shin, who's a Korean admiral who overwhelming odds defeated the Japanese Empire's invasion of Korea. And the thing, and part of that story is the one who, so he kept failing because he had so much potential that the people who were in line to be the leader or the admiral or the commanders, they didn't like him, so they kept demoting him. And this guy, one of the existing admirals, was in charge of the entire navy of Korea. And when Japan first came, his entire fleet was devastated. Right? So Yi Sun-shin came and saved the day, and then he was demoted again. And the same guy who lost his fleet, and Japan was just kind of on the withdrawal. I mean, he won every battle so far, Yi Sun-shin, but the guy who's horrible, who's just a friend to the emperor, was got in charge again, and he lost the fleet again. And that's what happens. You put these people in charge, they're your friends or whatever, and they're gonna fail. And then you don't put the competent people who have been doing good, who have been making progress, and you demote them, and you just.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's like a balancing act or a cycle, really, because think about it. If you had a society that was purely meritocratic, eventually all the people who are rightfully deemed to be at the bottom of the pile are going to be resentful of it, and they're going to do something about it. So you kind of have to have a balancing act between rewarding merit, but keeping the people you need in key positions loyal to you. Because, I mean, ultimately then, who's going to have your back when the rabble starts rousing?
It was the turtle ship, dude. It was those turtle ships that won him the fucking battle. Yeah, those things were crazy. Like, the Japanese always had a shitty navy back in those days. Like, they would use it to sail to Korea or China, and then they would unload their troops really quick.
Well,
because their navy sucked.
Well, they would just board the other ships, and they know they take them hand-to-hand combat, but also the Japanese would just hurry up because they didn't have so much armor or weaponry on their ships. They would just land on the shore, attack the town, and everyone on the opposing navy would go and help out on land, and then they get crushed. So that was a Japanese strategy, which was pretty smart. That's why they didn't have to focus on advanced weaponry and armor in their ships. Is they would just go land, attack the village, and the navy for that land is like, hey, we should go help, and they do, and they get killed, and then they got no one to man the ships.
Well, they could have just. Well, actually, you know what? I was thinking, well, why didn't the Korean Navy just burn down the Japanese boats once they've landed? But then you have a bunch of angry Japanese people trapped in Korea.
Yeah, they did. So the Japanese troops would just keep going further inland, but then that would just give the Koreans more time to reinforce their navy and eventually have a land army that would surround those Japanese that further entrench themselves on the mainland. So it was a good, smart, strategic thought process.
It was also kind of the Cortez strategy, because like, you're a Japanese like commander, right? Your men can't retreat now. Yeah. Like, they can't break. Like,
they can't reinforce. They can't. They can't do a lot of things.
So you just push further inland. Yeah. I mean, that's how Cortez took over the Aztecs. He just burnt all the ships, forced the men to like go in a certain direction. Japan did horrible things to Korea, dude. They brought back one time, like in the 1500s or something. Have you ever heard of that mountain of ears?
No.
That's in Japan. Like, there was one of the generals like went on one of the numerous raids on Korea, chopped off like 20,000 ears or something, and brought them back to Japan, and built a big mountain of them in the middle of Kyoto.
That's messed up. No wonder my father hated Japan. Anyways, we kind of went off topic. Do we want to go ahead and do an off topic?
Well, I kind of wanted to talk about psychedelics a little bit, but I don't know if you guys are interested in that.
No,
I was actually going to mention something about that to you, about what you were seeing and whatnot.
We could go and talk about that during our off topic. I mean, very much it's free, and I just don't want to flood off topic stuff on Gnosticism, since we already talked a lot about it.
Oh yeah, we've been off topic a lot. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and stop. So stay on Zoom. People on live chat can stay on live chat or YouTube or Steam it. It's just going to go down. Or for YouTube, it's going to go down. It's going to come back up in a minute or two. for people on Steam it. It's just gonna be a new show that's gonna pop up in the live feed. So give me a few minutes. You guys, Guard Gnome and Perseus, you guys can get started if you want, or just take a break. All right, and I'll be right back.
Yeah. What is it called? Well, I talked to my